All right. Hello, hello, everyone. Dialing in the AirPods as usual. Here we go. All right. Let's make sure this... Oh, I'm on the other screen. Let's make sure I got full screen here. Okay, cool. Let me know you can see me and hear me okay in the chat. That is not the correct output. Let's see here. Camlink 4, system audio. Where are you, system audio? Internal speakers, did I connect to my AirPods? Oh my goodness. It's always dying on my AirPods. There we go. All right, anyway, who cares? If it's system sound, that's fine with me. Just connect to them someday, maybe, please. Okay, cool. Let's get into the action here. Let's get into L12 hacks. Let's PWD this. All right, cool. Let me get this set up in PHP Storm. Next, next, next. Not that, that's a shift number. GWD, get working directory, little alias there to get my local path. There we go. Create project, 25 clicks. We're in. Okay, I've got a little project here. I don't know why it's not connected to my AirPods. Anyway, I made a new Laravel application because I think it's going to be easier to demo some of these things that some ideas that I have for Laravel 12 inside of a project. Even if we're hacking the vendor folder, I can port those into PRs, off stream. So I think for now, let's just kind of hack these out inside of a Laravel application to make life a little easier. So first things first. Maybe I connected. No, I didn't. Who cares? I don't care anymore. Let's just take these out because I can hear you all on my system audio. I don't know why it does that. All right. Hey, Jeffrey. How's it going? Hey, Kosa or Kusa? I don't know. Hopefully I'm saying that somewhat right. Thanks for joining live. Let's get into it here. All right. Okay, so again, I don't need to necessarily check out the master branch because we're going to hack inside of a project directly. So what we need to do, I think the simplest thing to do is to probably just let's generate just a resourceful controller, and I'll kind of work through. I don't even think it needs to be resourceful. Let's just generate an invocable single action controller. I can put some idealistic code in there, and we'll see if I can bring some of it to life. I'll probably end up doing 2 streams, so let's go about 30 or 40 minutes today and see how far I get. So let's do PHP artisan make controller -I think for invocable, and we'll just say like demo Laravel 12 ideas, right? Cool, it made that. Let's go back to the application. Laravel demo ideas. Okay, cool. Let's just get rid of some of the noise here. And there's 3 things that I think are potentially breaking changes. Potentially, they may not be. I know one of them definitely is. I think the other 2, you could argue, are probably not breaking changes, but I still think they're fresh enough concepts, and with Laravel 12 potentially releasing in the next month or 2, there's an opportunity to just roll it into kind of new features of that release. It sounds like that release is going to be pretty light. There's always little things that change, of course, but I know Taylor's really working towards minimizing breaking changes in these releases, especially since Laravel 12 was such a large kind of structural change that not everybody has adopted yet. So anyway, I don't think these are super breaking, but I think there's some things here. The first thing has to do with streamlined policies is what I'm going to call it. And simply up here, you have gate. Let's just go bring up the Laravel docs. Laravel, oh my goodness, Laravel.com policies, creating policies. Here we go. So let's just make a policy. We'll just say demo policy. This will probably, we probably need to make a user policy so we can really be around that particular model. Although I think I should have copied this one. Let's try that again. rm app policies user policy, and let's paste this and make it user because we do have a user model in the default application. Let's bring this up. Cool. All right. So to use this policy now in modern Laravel 11, you used to be able to kind of say this whatever, but now you say gate policy. Here we go. So we don't have to wire that up, I don't think. Let me get the controller where we actually say like gate authorize. Here we go. So we would say something like this, right? We would say like gate, and then we would say like view any, and potentially pass in, but view any doesn't take anything. I think you actually have to pass it the class name too. I don't necessarily use policies that often, and I'm gonna get to one of the reasons why I kind of don't use them very often. How do you actually wire this up? I always forget. It's like writing policies, authorizing actions. Here we go. So we say user cannot, okay, so that's fine. We would typically do this off the user, but let's see where there's like a gate facade. Here we go. So gate facade update post. It knows based on the model. Actions that don't require models. Here we go. Yeah, you need the class. That makes more sense. Okay, so we would say view any, and we would say like user class here. And let's bring in this. App models user. Yeah, okay. So this would be an example of like, okay, so long as you can do anything with user models, this invocable controller is fine. The code here isn't necessarily a huge deal to me. The code that I think could be streamlined is in the policy itself. So let's go look at the policy, this user policy. So inside this user policy, we have all of kind of the, let's call them cruddy actions, methods that correspond to cruddy actions. So we have view any, and we have view, and we have create, and we have update, and we have delete, and we have restore, and we have force delete. Now I don't have to change much in here to demonstrate my point. My point here is that all of these 7 methods, whether I use them or not, typically you'll find in the real world that pretty much all of these methods have very similar logic. Even in the code generation here, the default behavior is simply to return false. So it already is kind of demonstrating the point that all of this stuff shares a lot of logic. So you kind of have like the things without models, such as view any, and then you have the things with models. And the things with models are typically like, they're like user, ID is equal to like the other model user ID, right? So long as those match up, you get to do the thing to that model because it's your model, right? It's your record in the database. So a lot of the code ends up looking, let's use their model. A lot of their stuff ends up looking like this. And so like several of the other methods will look exactly like that. Same kind of logic. I think there's an opportunity to make this more streamlined. Now, there are things inside of a policy. For example, I think there's like a public function before. And like if this ends up returning true, then it won't even call these other methods. But if it returns false or null, or if it returns null, then it'll end up calling the other methods. But there's a caveat. I'm pretty sure, and we'll get into this, I'm pretty sure that before still requires the other method to be defined. You have to still define this method even if you never end up using it. And I just think that this is a little bit like redundant, right? Like I just think this class could look a little cleaner. So before is fine, but there's a couple opportunities. What I would like to see is like a function, like a public function, maybe like fallback, and it has like these things. So it's like, and this, you could basically define your class in this way. Let me just so you could do something like this. It's like, okay, before, if you're an admin or something, go ahead and return true, return false, do whatever. And then you don't necessarily have to define the other methods. Your fallback is like that common logic, right? That common logic that we had a minute ago. So like user ID is equal to, model user ID. That's the fallback. Now this needs to be a little bit more flexible than just a single method, probably, because again, we kind of have two styles of methods. We have the methods that you get an additional parameter and the methods that we don't. So maybe there's like a fallback and a fallback, potentially a fallback any. Maybe this is optional somehow. Maybe this is optional as well. You know, I don't know. There could be a lot of reflection that happens. Laravel uses a lot of reflection. So I think there's ways to keep this streamlined. But I'd love to just see a fallback, or maybe there's something more along the lines of like, there's like an any. There's like a specialized anything in here, and like you could just call it. I don't know what the name of that is, but what I want to do first is kind of hack on this and see if there's a way. For now, I'll just call it fallback because I think it kind of demonstrates the point. I'd like to see this work. So I think to be able to hack on this, we first need to do something like public function. We're going to need to keep that view any. So view any. Let's go back to the code here, and I think there's like view any. Here we go. Nope, they don't have an example. That's all right. What was view any? I think view any was just user, and then it assumed user. And again, this is all because I generated a policy-based, a model-based policy. So let's return true, and let's just do some kind of poor debugging here. We'll just do dump before, and I think for now I'll just return null to demonstrate that it passes through, and then here we'll do dump view any, and I don't think maybe this fallback exists, but I really don't think so. We'll do fallback, and let's just remove these for now. And this can just say return true. All right, cool. Let's go up here, and here we'll just return demoing. Cool. All right, let's fire this up. Or well, I think we're gonna need to make a web route. Let's fire this up in the browser. I think it's gonna be the easiest thing to do. This can just invoke our demo Laravel ideas class. All right. So let's do composer run dev, I think, is the new cool command. It's going to run everything. We don't need everything, but no, we don't care about any of that stuff. Let's just do this. PHP, let's go old school. PHP and artisan serve. I don't need NPM and all that other stuff running anyway. Okay, let's fire this up. Okay, this action is unauthorized. Okay. Why are we unauthorized? Where did we get? We're doing view any on the user class. Do we still need a model? I think we still need a model. Do we? Do we need view any on a model? This is where it all gets confusing. When generating the model options, okay, cool. It doesn't say anything about view any. What is the without model bit here? I think on, where's that without, there, methods without models. User role writer, determine. Some policy methods only receive an instance of the current authenticated user. This situation is, oh, I see, okay. We're not logged in. We're gonna have to be logged in. I really don't want to set up auth. I know it's simple with Breeze, but I'm just trying to think, is there another? Policies kind of assume that you're logged in always. How can we demo this policy quickly without necessarily setting up Breeze and everything? Wait a second. Do we even have I even done like MFS and anything? Yeah, I got a users table. Let's do this. Let's do this. I think the simplest thing would just be to do a route get, let's call it login, and let's do a function, and we'll say user equals user factory create, and then user, we'll do auth login user, and then we'll return redirect to slash. I think that's going to be the fastest way to hack a user login. Is it login or auth? I always forget. Let's find out. Yeah, login. Let's go ahead and remember me too. True. There we go. That way we don't keep getting logged out as we mess around in the browser. Okay, let's try this again. Let's see if this works. PHP artisan serve. Click here. It's going to 403, but we should be able to now say login. There we go. Cool. Okay, it's fast hack at a login. Okay, so of course policies, duh. Again, policies, basically, you know, you always have to be logged in. Of course, you also, you pretty much have to be authorized in any way. Now, they did have guest policies, but we won't go there. The point I'm trying to emphasize here is that there currently exists before and any, but let me remove the any method to kind of show how you're not really able to streamline these yet. So if I do this, you get, I thought we were, this action's, oh no, okay. I'm still logged in, but this is kind of the point. It's saying unauthorized because the method exists and the default behavior is to crap it out. Let me return true here, I believe, and we should end up seeing before and demoing if I refresh this, or at least go back to the login screen. So if we log in, no, that's not true. Is that true or not true? Yeah, the method still has to exist. Are we in debug mode? I would have expected an error. We are in debug mode, true. Oh, let's fix this. 127.0.0.1. That might be why we were having a cookie issue. Let's refresh this. And we might have to restart. This is why you set up your demos before you get online. Let's redo that. All right, let's go here. Okay, it's clearly remembering us. Let me clear out the cache here. Let's go into application, cookies. Let's get rid of all these. And let's refresh. I shouldn't be logged in. Now I should log in and get redirected. And we're getting a 403 unauthorized. I thought that we'll have to read the docs, but I think it's spitting this out. But if we put view any back, I think it's just gonna like work. Yeah, see, you're getting a 403. This is a little bit counterintuitive. You're getting a 403 because the default behavior, if the method is not defined, is to kick you out. But really, what that's demoing in my mind is that the method has to be defined, even if before returned true in this case. So I'll leave the view any method. Let me return true. Again, it's kind of confusing to demo, but if I return true from before, we don't see view any in the DD anymore in the dump, but this is still working. But if I go and comment out view any, it's kind of proof that you need to define all of those methods, otherwise it's just going to default behavior 403. And that's where the fallback comes into play. I would like to see some fallback methods that I could define. Honestly, in my policy, I could have it as simple as some kind of like fallback method, right? And the fallback method, again, if it's a user model, it's always going to get the user, right? And then maybe it optionally gets, you know, the other model. So like model equals null or whatever. And you can do things with this. Now you can say like, oh, okay, well, if model's defined, then you have to be the same relational, you know, database stuff. If it's just user, then maybe you have a certain role. And I can put all of that shared logic in one policy method and not have to worry about it. So I think there's two changes. I think the two changes are I think before, I don't feel like before should require that the other method exist, right? If before says null and the other method doesn't exist, then you can still just return the 403 as you are, but I don't think it should be required that the other method exists. or the method doesn't have to exist, but you have to have the fallback method. And so those would be the breaking changes, is because this method doesn't exist and we're kind of changing the way currently before ends up working. So this is kind of what we're after here. Oh, we don't have a type there. So we end up getting, this other model, which in this case is presumed to be the user model, but we can change that in the code generation of the stubs. So what I would like to see working is that fallback can just like be this method that I end up calling, and I only end up seeing fallback. I don't get a 403 because I have this special method defined that just kind of contains my shared logic. I think that would be, personally, I think that would be cool. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the chats. Let me know if you have written policies and you feel like they're kind of like overly redundant. So let's get deep down into how the authorization layer works. This is going to take a minute. This might be the whole stream today. Okay, let's go to authorize, because I think that's going to give us... Does anybody know how to like always disable this stupid editable... I just always want it to be open. Is there like a render all dot comments? No. Uncheck? I don't know. I wish it would always just be, the clickable version, not this streamlined editable one. Okay, so we have has. What does this end up doing? Has, abilities, allow if. Is there anything in here for before? Okay, before callbacks, after callbacks. Ooh, what does after do? Call policy before. Okay, so what does this stuff do? Gate. Build ability callbacks. Okay, if string contains @ we parse the callback into the class and method. Resolve the policy. Array shift. Okay, dump results, call policy before. And then if is set method, policy method, otherwise policy function get args. Define a policy class for a given class type. Register before callback. Okay, we already have an after callback. That's interesting. Where do these get used? Call after callbacks. Where does this get called? Okay, we tap. Is this the only place? Call after callbacks. Get the raw result from the authorization callback. Where does this get called? Current method. Inspect. Authorize. Oh, okay. Okay. Authorize calls inspect, which then calls authorize. So inspect calls raw on the ability. Okay. Okay. So theoretically we're calling this method, which then calls inspect, which calls raw, and raw finds our call before callbacks. Okay. And then if the result is null, as we expect, it's going to then call the other stuff. And then it's going to call the after callbacks. Okay. The after callbacks are interesting. The after callbacks are interesting. I wonder if there's a way to tap into the after callbacks to automatically give us fallback. And are the after callbacks documented? After. You may use after method to define a closure to be executed after all other authorization checks. Okay. Okay, that's not exactly. Okay, that's not exactly the behavior. This is after. You may use the after method to define a closure to be executed after all other authorization checks. Does this get called no matter what? After calling those, we will call the after callbacks that are registered with the gate, which allows a developer to do logging if that is required for the application. Then we'll return the result. Okay, so they tap the after callbacks and give them the result. Okay. So the after callbacks fire kind of no matter what. That's not exactly what we're trying to build here. What we're trying to build here is a way to streamline the actual authorization process. So let's take a look at the before callbacks. Can be called with user. Okay, this can be called with user before. Okay, if it's not null, then just go ahead and return that. Okay, fine. I don't think there's any change that we need to make to before. If before exists, it's always going to run, even in the event of our fallback. I think the call auth callback is where things may change a little bit. So here, resolve and call the appropriate authorization callback. Okay, so resolve and call auth callback. Okay, so if is set arguments, fine. We're not gonna mess with that. Can be called with user. Can be called with user class, method, or invoke. Where does method come from? Parse callback. So here's ability. If string callbacks, so this must get saved, I guess. Parse callbacks. Oh, okay. Okay. That's interesting. That's a path that's going to have to get covered. Can be called with user. Method allows guess. Method allows it. Callback allowable guess. Okay. What's interesting, I think this is happening higher up. I think there's some things that are happening a little bit higher up here, because when view any, okay, let's just do this. Let's just add some debugging. Let's just add some debugging when we call raw. First we call before callbacks. Okay, so what I want to see is, let's just do some simple like dumping here. So let's say before, okay. Because what I want to do is I want to find out when we don't have view any, where does Laravel stop? Does it stop even before this? Is there some kind of pre-check to make sure that the method exists? Or is it buried within here? The code's a little dense, so let's just unpack it for a second. So we can say calling probably ability, I think, is what we're saying here. I don't know what type ability is. Let's see what it is. It says it's a string, so we should be able to say ability. And what I would expect in our case is to see calling view any, right? So what I would expect to see is dump and then calling view any, and then we get some kind of like 403 that happens. That's what I would expect. So let's go back to our policy and let's kind of Z this out for a second. Let's go back here to this state. Even though I'm returning true, I would expect that policy before is, we're still going to get the 403. That's what I would expect. Let's find out. So if I go here, I refresh. Okay, we get before, we get calling view any. This is as expected, good. And then we end up with a 403. So it's attempting to call view any. So our check then, my guess, is, let's just say after. Let's see if it gets to after. I don't think that it will. Oh, it does. Okay. Dispatch gate evaluated event. Oh, okay, this simply returns. What calls raw? I forgot. Authorize ends up calling raw. So let's go to the base method. Okay, if result is instance of response, return result. Otherwise, result, respond allow, this default deny. Okay, so what we're getting is, what we're probably getting here is null. What we're probably getting here is null. So we can say if, or well, let's just dump result, right? We should see null here. Yeah, we do. Okay. Okay. So it's there's not simply a 403 because the method is not defined. I think that there was an older version. I do remember there was an older version of Laravel. If you trolled the upgrade log or the upgrade guide, there's kind of, I think it was a little bit undocumented, but I remember it being something in Shift that like Laravel 7, I want to say, or maybe 5.7, but in a now much previous version of the framework, I thought it became required that you had to have the method defined. In our case, the method's not defined, so it's not a big deal. But what all these dumps ultimately tell me is that raw, we kind of would do the same thing here. We would now do the same thing. If is null, result. And then we would have to say like, and, method exists. And I don't know the object yet. I think these get delegated to the call. But basically we would kind of do a very similar thing here of like call fallback. We would say something like call auth fallback, right? And that new method would then say, okay, if the fallback method exists, call it with the similar arguments, see if it works, right? I mean, we could theoretically even tap that into the after callback, but again, I don't think the after callbacks fire the way we would expect based on it's unfortunate that the docs kind of only have before or after authorization hooks. Okay, you may use a method. I'm just trying to see, can we just throw in fallback like as a default, thing. Values returned by the after closures will not override the result of the authorization check unless the gate or policy returned null. Okay. Yeah. Well, no, wait a second. That is, I think what you could do in raw, I think the simplest implementation in raw would then be to say, if results null and the policy class has fallback, push it into, add it as an after callback. And again, now it would get chained. Now the issue there would be, where does it run in the chain? You'd almost need like a pre-pinned after callbacks. And I think that gets a little fancy now that I'm thinking about it. I think you should really, I think the framework aims to be very clear, especially in these core levels. I mean, that's why you see these like wonderfully, dense like comments that happen here. And the code's very kind of expressive. I think calling it out as its own if statement instead of getting fancy and say, oh, well, I can just throw that into, I could just prepin that as an after callback because it kind of works the same way. Well, sure, it works the same way. But from a framework maintainability perspective, that's not very clear, right? That it got stuffed in the after callbacks. And maybe someday somebody has like a clear after callbacks or something, and then some weird side effects are now happening. So I think it deserves to be its own thing. What I want to do before we go write all that method is, again, simply just prove that we would say, try calling fallback, right? I would want to see this in our dumps. So let's just get rid of some of these other dumps because we know where we are now. And let's refresh and see what we see. Okay, try calling fallback. Perfect. Okay, cool. Let's see if we can make that actually work. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff that happens here. So let's see what resolve auth callback is. Resolve the callable for the given ability and arguments. Sorry. Okay. So I'm just wondering, could I hack this? Because this really just gets view any, right? Part of me wonders if I could just simply hack this and pass it fallback, right? That might be the easiest approach. Let's just try that. So try calling fallback. We no longer do ability anymore. Maybe it wants it though, you know, maybe you do a check in there. I think when you start doing that, you may as well just define the method. So I don't think that makes any sense. I think you do something like this, and I basically say call auth callback. I could overwrite this, but really we hack it and we simply say fallback here. I'm curious if this works. Again, we're not trying to make the PR right now. I'm just trying to prove if we can get it to work the way we have described this stream. So let's run this. There we go. It worked. True, demoing. We got back to the demoing bit. Okay, so this works. Awesome. So we've maintained that we're still calling before. Oops, sorry. Before should return null. That's interesting. Okay, there we go. We weren't even getting to fallback. We just, it allowed us to play on instead of the 403. Wait a second. Why did that allow us to play? I'm confused now. Let's go back to this. We don't see fallback. Policy before return true. Was it 403ing before? Oh, it was 403ing because we still kept returning null. Sorry, let's go back. Let me demo the property. I'm returning true. This is proof that this is returning before we ended up then calling a fallback and everything's fine, right? Because we just returned true here. Let me just remove that code so we're not confusing ourselves. Let's just comment this fallback back out. Let's run this. Okay, no, we get a 403 because view any's not defined, but we have fallback. We've changed the code. This is why it's a breaking change. So let's go through this now that we built it, just to kind of wrap up the stream. Okay, if we look at our policy, we have before. We're leveraging a streamline method inside the policy, which exists today. The caveat to all of that, though, let's comment this back out. The caveat to all this is that you still have to define view any. Even though I'm returning true here, you still have to return or at least declare a view any method, because that attempts to be called and that overrides the before any. That's the change that's within the framework from an earlier version. Before, I think they didn't say is null result here. They ended up preserving this result, right? So there is a catch there, and that's also another, again, potentially breaking change. So I'll kind of investigate that a little bit more off stream. But even though I am returning true here and I'm satisfying the policy because that other view any method is not defined, we're still getting a 403, unfortunately. Now, if I uncomment this and I still end up returning true, I think it passes. So we got policy for true, and now we're getting to demoing. We're not getting the 403. I'm curious, can I simply get rid of that and it still work? Yeah, it does. So proof that the method, we're not seeing view any, but it's kind of proof that that method has to exist for this to kind of work. And this is where I think there's still some work to do. So let me keep going here. Even though I'm not returning anything from here, or potentially even returning false, it doesn't matter because I've already returned view any I've already returned true from before, but it's still attempting to call this, or it checks that somewhere. So I need to figure out where it also checks that method exists and still ends up returning a 403. But anyway, even though we're doing false, it's not doing what I expect it to do. So, okay, why are you bouncing? Oh, I don't want to save. So now the thing is, let's comment this back out. Let's go back to the 403 state because it doesn't exist. We're ending up in that null place. Let's uncomment our new method. We still should be 403, but let's go back to our framework code and uncomment this result, which is going to now get us back to a true place. It's going to override, and we should end up back to demoing. But we're not actually getting into fallback, which is interesting. It's still honoring the return value of before, which is the correct way to behave. A little confusing, but it's the correct way that it should behave. Let's return null here to allow it to pass on. It should skip over view any, doesn't care that it's defined or not, and hit our fallback and show us demoing. Hits our fallback, still returns true, shows us demoing. So the thing left to do is basically find, I think the additional change, which is breaking, is find where before still requires view any in our case, right? I'd like to also remove that because I think that's the other streamline. The other streamline is if I just have a before and I say whatever, and I don't define anything else, the 403 is fine. But if I define before and I say true here, I just put all my logic here, you could argue that's not really the way you're supposed to write it, but you know, I don't want to see a 403, I return true, right? I don't know. Maybe that's too fancy. I'm gonna think on that. I see why they're requiring the other method, but it just seems a little bit too fancy. I think the other thing to think on is, does this need to be, you know, does your fallback method, I keep losing my tabs here, does that fallback method maybe want to know like the original gate you tried to call, you know, in this case, original is equal to view any. Does that have value? Probably, you know. So again, this probably, instead of piggybacking the call auth callback, we probably need like a call fallback callback, right? Or something. Call auth fallback. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of work to do here, but we proved that it's possible with a limited amount of changes. That's kind of the PRs that I think end up being best in Laravel. Again, a well-tested, a well-documented, and then kind of a well-sold reasoning behind this. And I think in this case, it's just one method. It's symmetrical with the other code. I could craft a comment, much like these, that says, if we have not, you know, if we still have not received something, but a fallback method exists, attempt to call it with the same arguments, kind of thing. You know, it's documented, I'll well test it. And then the selling point, again, is that I may not want a policy that has to have the 7 or 8 cruddy methods. I might just want something with a little bit of a before, cater 1 or 2 of those, and then just have a fallback for everything else, right? I think there's value in that. Again, I don't use policies often, but when I do, I just always feel like they're so heavy unnecessarily. So let me know what you think in the chat if you feel the same way. But yeah, I think there's something to be said here. There's something here to do. So in the meantime, let me tease the other two, and then I'm gonna get off the stream for the day. Let's go back to our original ideas. The other thing, and I've PR'd this before, and it got some decent comments, and I PR'd something along the line of like return, you know, status unauthorized, or something like that, right? I teased this little status helper to add it into the framework, and it was met with you know, a little bit of resistance. I think again, everything in the framework has its time. I wouldn't be surprised to see something like this in the framework someday. But this is also a very easy helper to add as a package. And I think ultimately that's why Taylor closed it, is just because it's like, we'll just add this as a package. But with Laravel 12 coming, I think there's an opportunity to revisit this. And one of the biggest things that was in those PR comments was like, well, why not just make an enum, right? I mean, why do all this flexibility? That there's value in an enum in other places of the framework. So I think an enum, whoops, let's give myself a few more minutes here. I think an enum has value in other areas of the code. So I am wondering if first of all, there's an ability to, say now unauthorized. Now I think, I'm pretty sure the Symfony response already has these. If I go way down into Symfony, I think they have like an HTTP. Yeah, they already have all of these. So, you could just say, okay, well, we could just use Symfony's, right? So Symfony's class constant. It's not as clean as like a backed enum, and I think there's an opportunity on the enums to do other things. But the ultimate point here is that you're really being able to say something like return 200 from your controller. Now, wrapping it in an enum allows you to minimize the breaking change here, because you can do an instance of on the enum as opposed to an integer. Some people might be returning integers now, which just returns a 200 string technically in the response. But that would break existing code is the point, whereas an enum could be instance of, and that's a brand new thing, and it wouldn't break any existing code, which means it could be PR'd into Laravel 11. But I think it's a new enough concept that piggybacking it into 12, again, gives it a little bit of new light. Maybe that PR has a better chance. Again, I don't know. These are ideas. This might have some value. And again, I think the class constant here is a little bit ugly, and again, doesn't allow you to do the enum. So I think an HTTP status that's a little more streamlined of like, okay, could have some value here. The ultimate value is being able to return effectively a status code directly from a controller as a legitimate response, which then gets turned into, the appropriate response. But yeah, I think it's shorthand. So yeah, anyway, I think there's some opportunity here with that. And then the final thing, I did this also last year with Laravel 11 and ended up also getting closed. And I think it was maybe a little bit too drastic, but the whole, fillable versus, guarded is just silly, I think, for like non-beginner Laravel developers. I definitely appreciate mass assignment and so forth, but I think as you use Laravel more, I think you find a lot of people just make their models unguarded so they can just write code in their application with lower friction. And I feel like there could be something more here. And I tried this last year. I think it was a little heavy. I think it was a little late. And again, any changes to Eloquent and the builder, there's such core things in Laravel. I think the team is very nervous about changing anything there, rightly so. But I would really love to see something like, user, save, or be able to create this, in this case with like, there is like a request validated. If we were using a form request up here, we would have attributes to that. There's attributes to this. I'd love to be able to do something like this. I'd love to be able to write this code. This would do a lot of things underneath, and that's why it was a little magical as well. And I think the PR was met with a lot of comments, is because underneath, if I passed in a safe object, in this case, the validated data, it would kind of just save it no matter what, right? It wouldn't worry about fillable or guarded or any of that stuff. It would just put that stuff in there because I, as the developer, am saying, this is a safe object which has been validated. I'm in control, sharp knives. I know what I'm doing. I take responsibility. Just create it. Just create it. And there's ways to write this today. You can say something like user, force fill, request, arrow, safe, all, I think, and then you can say create. So you can write all this stuff to make this happen. But again, you do this common enough in Laravel that I think this shorthand has value, right? This shorthand, the save, update, whatever, it has value being able to kind of quickly pass it a safe object. I would love to be able to do this. And again, you have to think of all the code that's saved. It's not just the difference between these two lines. It's also not having to define fillable and guarded everywhere in your models, which is an annoyance. I mean, you add a new field to a model and you're doing fillable, And now, you know, your new code breaks because, oh, you tried to, you know, something gets saved to the database when it shouldn't have, right? Or something doesn't get saved to the database because you didn't, you know, set that column, and vice versa. It's just such a terrible dance. It's an annoying dance to me as someone who's used Laravel for 12 years now. I just wish I could be in charge as the developer and know that, okay, I'm giving you a save object, just save it, you know, just save it, just do it. Anyway, those are the two things I want to hack on next. We'll do that next week. Let me finalize the thoughts around this policy thing. I'll put the PR there, I'll share it, and then we'll pick one of these for next week. So thanks everybody for watching live. See you next time.